So in Cisco, we call it a summation of how you design your experience, whether it's your product-centric experience, interaction-centric experience, or a transaction-centric experience. And the second thing which comes behind experience is your multi-channel strategy, whatever your access points, wherever you reach your customers. And then the third thing, which is around experience, is how do you create a two-way mechanism? So that's one. But the second thing I'm also going to talk about is the technology that then goes behind that experience. Because if you were to compare, the experience on a certain website, you might find that, well, as you're going through your process of finding what you want to buy, and then suddenly you are checking out, the website goes kaput, and you have to start all over again. Whereas there are certain websites that make it so seamless for you that you can virtually sail through the entire process. So why does that happen? What is that decision that goes behind that process? That's what I would be spending on. So there's a whole science of portfolio investment that you take. You treat technology as a portfolio. You do not treat technology as what we call an isolation of a data center or a network, et cetera, et cetera. And then thereafter comes the whole road mapping, because one of the panelists mentioned, experience is never dynamic. It's never static. It's a dynamic, process. And if the folks who make that experiential strategy, I would ask you folks, is do each one of you have a vision right up to the next 5 years? Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. What your experience is going to look like. And here is an experience that we have working with some of our best corporations, and they're large retailers in their own standards. They themselves don't know what 5 years down the line their customer experience is going to look like. And that's actually one of the very key learnings. Most of the retailers would have a view what they would like to do 5 years henceforth, but they would still consider that as a risky investment. So how do you build your roadmap of technology portfolio investments considering where you would be 5 years down the line? So let me give you 5 key examples. Let's start with that for a moment. Amazon, everyone knows about it, right? It's an amazing experience of when you log on to an Amazon site, you want to buy a book. First, it's about a fact that there are so many categories. I mean, my view about Amazon used to be, I have to go there and buy books. And I was consulting one of automotive OEMs in India, and we were thinking about how is it that you could accelerate your parts that you sell, the service parts that you sell, and you reach out to your customers. How can you accelerate the sales of your service parts? And voila, we had to go and reference out a benchmark model, and we realized Amazon also sells parts. There is a retailer in Australia, cheapauto.com, which also sells auto parts. So the first thing is about really why I spoke about Amazon is that they have a clear clarity in terms of the categories that they will sell. And if you're a consumer, what you'll realize is that they have a very clear view where exactly on the website are you going, what exactly are you referencing, and they will have a recommendation or a contextual model based on your behavior that they will tell you exactly, here are the things that we recommend to you because you're on this part of the website, and this is what you should consider with the price points, with the whole process behind that of checkout, etc., mapped out. That's one example I thought would be relevant for the group to consider. And once I'm done, we'll see how we compare these 5 examples. The second example, if I was to consider, is of a brick-and-mortar organizations, 2 of them in India, who have, in my view, at least a fairly robust online model. And they are the 2 banks I will talk about, HDFC Bank or an ICICI Bank. The whole thought process was that as consumers, we folks have less time today, and hence we do not prefer to go to the branch, and we prefer to do a lot of stuff online. So hence, when you sign up as an HDFC customer, their internal strategy is to really expose you to the bank's products and get you hooked on to the bank's end-to-end life cycle of offerings that they have for you from a financial perspective. So when you log on to the ATM, you actually get today to do a lot of stuff that you otherwise would have had to go to the branch for, right? Now that's also another example why I wanted to bring you. You see the fact that what you do in the branch, what you do in the ATM, and what you do online, there is a lot of synergy as what is it that they offer to you as an end customer. That's experience, right? So again, Amazon, HDFC, ICICI. What you're seeing is one is a pure play online retailer, and these are two other brick and mortar organizations, but with a fairly robust online strategy. And when I say online strategy, I'm not just mentioning about the websites. You access your applications on the mobile devices or even on the ATM side of it. The third example I thought would be of relevance for the group is, how much of you have experienced Mini Cooper, their website? Or you know about Mini? Mini as a car. Okay. Ever try going onto their website? It's a classic online way of selling a car. You can log onto their website, configure your car, and do a checkout. Go to a dealership, you'll get the car. And that's as complex as being able to configure. And trust me, in automotive, it's the most complex model. Because in retail, you still are selling a finished product. In automotive, you're actually configuring an entire product, whether it's the color, whether it's what kind of wheel rims you want, what kind of seating do you want, what kind of engine do you want, and imagine the supply chain that has to be set up at the back end to be able to fulfill it, yet they've been able to master it. Now, these are 5 examples. The reason I quoted those 5 examples was that, all of them have a clear view with regards to their experiential strategy, number 1. And number 2, they have a very clear view with regards to their end consumers with whom they interact with. And 3 is their ability to design a process which starts from the end customer but goes back into the back end, and I'll speak about that also, captures their clear understanding of what that process will be and hence what kind of technology do we need to have in place to be able to deliver to that customer's requirements. So that was the reason. So this was why I started this conversation, to really have these 5 examples before all of you. So let me now talk about this experiential strategy a bit. In all of these 5 examples, you'll realize that they're basically a sum of 3 things. In one example, like in Amazon, what you get is a fairly strong, robust transactional model. So it's a very seamless checkout process, number 1. And they tell you, which is as customers of similar, when they were looking for a similar book, this is what they got. And when you're checking out, they will have recommendations, and then the process is smooth. Similarly, in the Amazon model, you'll realize there's a very strong focus on the product experience. So they have a very clear view about, that this is the kind of categories we want to do. This is the kind of, so this relevant segment of the customer who logs into the site, puts his login ID and a password, here are the relevant categories that we need to present to this individual. And then, lastly, which is the most important one, is the interaction experience. Because that's one area where most of the retailers would, or folks who want to have their retail strategy right, miss out. So when I say interaction experience, for example, you get this thing about, have you considered, you get the price points, you get a kind of a recommendation of what should be relevant for your purchase process for that specific transaction. So if that's their summation, interaction, transaction, and the product experience. And if you were to go down to any of the other 4 examples I quoted out, whether it's a physical world plus online model, or whether it's an automotive experience, they all have a fairly robust, summed up experience. Product, transaction, and interaction. But what you'll realize is that when it comes down to designing your own experience, it's fairly imperative when you design your strategy is to know which space would you operate in. In the physical world, it's easier to understand. So, for example, the experience that you get when you walk into a McDonald's is buy and leave. That's it. 20 rupees to 30 rupees. That's an experience that doesn't really require a fairly advanced technology investment. But the moment you start talking about an experience that a Macy's offers or an Amazon offers, or it's an immersive experience, the kind of technology that you require to have as a platform to be able to deliver that experience has to be fairly immersive, has to be fairly well thought through, right from your data center, right from your connectivity, security, payments, the information gateways, etc. All of that has to be fairly well thought through because they have a clear impact. Now, what happens is when you design the entire strategy in terms of product, interaction, and transaction, all of these customer touch points throw up a lot of information. So what happens is there's a framework at the back end that these enterprises use. Obviously, they will have different terminologies, but we in Cisco, we classified that as what we call as CASA. So for every click that you do, or for every visit that you have in the physical world, or for every time you access the application on the mobile device, they would know what was your behavior. That's the process to capture it out the right way. And through the advanced analytics that's set into the system, they'll be able to analyze exactly what was the process. So that's the second part of it. We call it CASA framework. It's capture and analyze. And then thereafter, because of their own strong compute environment, the data centers, they're able to store it. But the key thing is, then comes the next one, which is act. So it's not a process where they've just invested in a front end, they've not just invested in a technology, they've not just invested in an application, but they have a robust two-way communication process with their customers. What do you do with it? How do you act? So some of them will tell you a contextual process. Here is a recommended thing because you're looking at this book. Some of them will have a virtual expert who they would give an option, would you like to talk to a virtual expert or a virtual advisor? So all of them have hence a very robust two-way mechanism once the experience is designed right, and that follows into the technology strategy. Online retailer in the future face a disruption because, or can create a disruption. Okay, sure. Can create a disruption because they can actually open up, through alliances, access points in the front end. Irrespective of that, what is happening is there is going to be a shift online, offline, and that will form your next thing in terms of experiences, the access points through which you reach out to your customers. And then comes the back end, which is where I would like to stress that the focus is not in terms of building your technology strategy as a isolation in infrastructure, application, etc. It's also about looking at that 5-year roadmap and then defining, well, my portfolio, and treating technology as a portfolio. So there's an HBR study, it's an HBR book actually, you can read that, treating infrastructure as a portfolio of investments. Will tell you that when you build your infrastructure out, maybe your first year is about really looking at transactional and data center or an infrastructure focus, but 5 years down the line, you may have to look at a very different technology portfolio. So just to summarize, the message I wanted to highlight was through those 5 examples was that when you define your technology strategy, what technologies to adopt, and there are so many of them out over there, it's imperative that you focus on a 5-year roadmap for your experience or your organizational strategy, in which you should know the disruptions, the market, the customer, etc., whether you will have online, offline, mix, etc., and then around that, based on a year-by-year size growth, define how much goes into infrastructure, how much goes into application, how much goes into strategic applications, how much goes into collaborative applications that you may require once you reach a certain scale 5 years down the line. Thank you very much.